Hello everyone, Janardhana here. Now we are going to listen to podcast news which includes national, international and business, economy, news. While walking in the morning or evening, while cooking, cycling or during free time you can listen. It will enhance your learning and understanding of various accents and pronunciations. Listening improves the quality of communication and comprehension. Before going ahead, I would like to welcome you all to the virtual school. A new way of learning and teaching, with the vision of Let's Grow Together. Our mission is to learn how to learn and teach how to teach. So stay tuned. And here we go. June 18, 2021. Important national news. Apex Court approves CBSE assessment formula Class 12 results to be arrived at by considering marks in unit tests, classes 10 and 11. Krishnadas Rajagopal, New Delhi. The Supreme Court on Thursday gave in principle clearance to the schemes placed on record by the CBSE and the ICSE to assess the final marks of Class 12 students whose exams were cancelled due to COVID-19. The CBSE has divided the marks assessment process into two components: theory and practical. The theory component would be assessed by first giving 30% weightage to average scores obtained by the students in Class 10 in their 3 best performing subjects out of a total 5. Secondly, another 30% weightage would be given to marks based on the theory component of the final exam taken in Class 11. Finally, 40% weightage would be given for marks obtained in one or more unit tests, midterm exams, and pre-board exams in Class 12. So, if the total marks for theory is 80, the 30% weightage of classes 10 and 11 would come to 24 marks each, and the 40% weightage derived from performances in tests conducted in Class 12 would translate to the remaining 32 marks. On the practical side, calculation would be on the actual basis of the marks uploaded by the schools on the CBSE's portal. Students freed as court rejects police's stand. Police wanted time to verify addresses. Victory stand. Natasha Narwal, Asifik Bultanha and Devangana Kulata outside Tihar jail in Delhi after their release on Thursday. Sushil Kumar Verma. Swabam Rocky Singh, New Delhi. A Delhi court on Thursday issued the release warrant for Jawaharlal Nehru University students and activists Devangana Kulata and Natasha Narwal and Jamia Millia Islamia student Asifik Bultanha, who were arrested in May last year in connection with the Northeast Delhi riots. They were released from Tihar jail in the evening. Additional Sessions Judge Ravinder Bedi rejected the Delhi police argument that it needed more time to verify the permanent addresses of the 3 accused as they were outside Delhi. I would say this by itself cannot be a plausible reason for the accused to be kept imprisoned till the time such reports are filed, the judge said. The accused is directed to be released forthwith as per orders of the Delhi High Court, the court said, taking into account the undertaking given by counsel of the accused that their clients would not leave the jurisdiction of the capital. In the morning, the High Court directed the trial court to proceed with promptitude and expedition on the pleas filed by the 3 activists for immediate release. The orders enlarging the applicants on bail have already been rendered by us. It needs to be implemented, the HC said. I have written to PM thrice to withdraw Governor Mamta. She denies allegations of post-poll violence. Special Correspondent, Kolkata. West Bengal Chief Minister Mamta Banerjee said on Thursday that she had written thrice to Prime Minister Narendra Modi to withdraw Governor Jagdeep Dhankar from the state. She was responding to questions on Mr. Dhankar's visit to Delhi. She described the governor as centre's own person and denied allegations of post-poll violence. A child can be cajoled into silence. In this case, speech is silver and silence is golden, the chief minister said, responding to the governor's allegations of post-poll violence in the state. On speculation that the governor might be changed, Ms. Banerjee said she had not been informed about any such development. How am I supposed to know? When a governor is appointed, the state government is usually consulted. That was not done in this case, she said. This is the first time the chief minister has gone on record that she had written to the PM on withdrawing the governor. A deal prompted by one couple's need, another's desi repayment dispute led parents who sold their baby to file kidnapping complaint, landing all in police net. The 6 accused in police custody. Special arrangement. Hemani Bhandari, New Delhi. A couple's need for money and another's desire for a male child led them to strike a deal on a 6-day-old infant and subsequently land in police net. Deputy Commissioner of Police, South, Atul Thakur said the accused have been identified as Vidyanand Yadav, 50, his wife Rampari Yadav, 45, Raman Kumar Yadav, 32, Haripal Singh, 50, Govind Kumar, 30, and his 24-year-old wife Pooja. The police said on Tuesday they received a call at Fatehpur police station from Mr. Govind, who said his 6-day-old baby boy had been kidnapped. When the police reached the spot in Ayanagar, he said his wife, Ms. Pooja, had delivered the baby on June 8. One of their friends, Haripal Singh, invited the couple to live with him because there wasn't enough space at their rented accommodation. On June 12, the couple reached the friend's residence in Ayanagar where Mr. Haripal locked them from outside and fled with the child, alleged Mr. Govind. The police registered a kidnapping case based on his statement. A team led by Station House Officer Kuldeep Singh launched the investigation and traced Mr. Haripal, who allegedly told them that the couple had, in fact, given the child willingly to the relatives of his friend, Mr. Raman, who lives in the Modi Bagh Yugis. When the police reached Mr. Raman's house, he told them that the couple had sold the baby to his relatives, Mr. Vidyanand and Ms. Rampari for 3.6 Indian rupees lakh, and the duo had already left for Kanpur. The police sought the details of the train they had boarded and nabbed the couple from Kanpur railway station. They were then brought to Delhi. Financial crisis. Further investigation revealed that Mr. Govind and Ms. Pooja were extremely poor and needed money, for which they agreed to sell their baby for 3.6 Indian rupees lakh to Mr. Vidyanand and Ms. Rampari through Mr. Haripal and Mr. Raman. When Vidyanand and Rampari were questioned, they said they were married for 25 years but couldn't bear a child, because of which their relatives in their village in Bihar would demean them and use derogatory words. Vidyanand, in fact, sold his land to be able to buy the baby. He told Raman that he will only take the child if it's a boy, said a senior police officer. A written agreement was signed between the two parties and pictures were also taken. Police said Mr. Govind decided to inform them because they got only 2 Indian rupees lakh cash and 4 checks of 40,000 Indian rupees each dated June 18. Mr. Govind wanted to encash the checks on June 14 and leave for his village immediately. When he tried to reach Mr. Haripal and Mr. Raman on phone, they blocked him. He also couldn't reach them physically. Feeling cheated, he decided to call the police. Continue demolition of illegal buildings in Arvali forest land. SC had refused to give encroachers any quarter on June 7. Legal correspondent, New Delhi. The Supreme Court on Thursday refused to halt the demolition of about 10,000 unauthorized residential constructions encroaching into the ecologically fragile Arvali forest land near Lakerpur Kori village in Haryana. A bench of Justices A.M. Kanwilkar and Dinesh Maheshwari had refused to give encroachers any quarter on June 7 while ordering the demolition. The court had categorically said that land grabbers cannot take the refuge of the rule of law and demand fairness. However, fresh petitions were filed urging the court to revisit its order and provide for rehabilitation of the residents, including children. The petitioners, mostly residents whose properties face the axe, said they were not given time to submit documents to the local authorities to prove their claim. But the court refused to budge on Thursday. Onus on state. The bench said the residents had enough time to prove their claims in accordance with a notification issued by Haryana in 2020. The court said the onus was on the state to rehabilitate the residents in compliance with a 2003 scheme. The demolition would continue. Petitioners were obligated to provide documents to come under the rehabilitation scheme, which they have failed to do. We have recorded the submission that clearance of unlawful encroachment on forest land will be carried out as per due process of law, the court said. The Haryana government said officials and personnel were pelted with stones at the site of demolition. However, the court declined to pass any orders while merely telling the authorities, "You know what to do then." The court had in its June 7 order made it clear that the encroachers should be evicted by the land even by force. The next hearing is scheduled on July 27. Assam seeks realignment of tracks through wetland. Trains have run over several elephants. Whistling teals at Deepur Beel near Guwahati. Special correspondent, Guwahati. The Assam government has proposed the realignment of a broad-gauge railway line through the Deepur Beel, an important bird area designated under the Ramsar Convention of Wetlands. Several elephants have been run over on the railway track between the elevated Rani Reserve Forest and the sanctuary. The elephants use 4 corridors crossing the track to often bathe and feed on the aquatic plants in the wetland. The wetland is about 10 kilometers southwest of Guwahati. We have sent a proposal to the Center for the realignment of the railway line running through the wetland, which creates noise pollution and disturbs the migratory birds. Clearance from the National Green Tribunal (NGT) is expected once the eco-sensitive zone is declared by the authorities concerned, State Environment and Forest Minister Parimal Suklavidya said at a meeting on the beautification of the wetland on Thursday. Garbage dump. The meeting was held with Guwahati Development Department Minister Ashok Singhal, who sought steps to check the pollution of the wetland, under stress from a dumping site nearby and channels that carry untreated sewage from the city. Pet dog fights a battle with the bulge. 50 kg dog undergoes laparoscopic sleeve gastrectomy. The surgery was performed on June 6. Special arrangement. Reina Asainer Navi, Mumbai. In what could be a first-of-its-kind surgery, a laparoscopic sleeve gastrectomy was performed recently on an 8-year-old dog weighing 50 kilograms. Deepika, an Indie crossbreed, was adopted by Yasmin Darawala, a resident of Pune. Initially, she was quite active. Would run around the house, play with me, and go for walks. Gradually, she lost interest in all activities, would just sit on the couch, salivating and panting severely, she said. Deepika's food intake and medication also increased. Ms. Darawala said, "I came across Dr. Narendra Pardeshi of Small Animal Clinic, Pune, on the internet. We tried to reduce her weight based on his prescribed diets for obesity, cardiac food, and joint foods. When none of these worked, Dr. Pardeshi suggested a laparoscopic sleeve gastrectomy surgery, for which Ms. Darawala consulted Dr. Shashank Shah, a bariatric surgeon at Laparo Obeso Center, Pune. Like humans, obesity is a silent killer in animals too. There are many obese pets in the country that need to undergo surgery. Indian dogs who are fed more on carbohydrate-rich food can become obese, as was the case here," said Dr. Shah. The normal lifespan of dogs is 12 to 15 years, which can reduce by 6 years if they are obese, Dr. Pardeshi said, adding, "Deepika weighed 50 kilograms against an ideal weight of 18 to 20 kilograms, and we met with no success after prescribing her dog foods, exercise, and thyroid medication. The surgery was done on June 6. After surgery, we advised restricted movement and exercise for 15 days. Now the dog's weight is about 45 kg, Dr. Pardeshi added. Ex-encounter specialist, 2 others sent to NIA custody held in connection with the Antilla bomb scare, murder case. Caught in a web, Pradeep Sharma arriving at the NIA office in Mumbai earlier this year. Vivek Bendre. Special Correspondent, Mumbai. Former encounter specialist and Shiv Sena leader Pradeep Sharma and 2 others, arrested by the National Investigation Agency, NIA, in connection with the Antilla bomb scare and Mansukh Hiran murder case, have been sent to NIA custody till June 28. Early on Thursday morning, NIA officials conducted searches at Mr. Sharma's residence at Andheri and questioned him till noon, after which he was placed under arrest. Later, the NIA arrested Satish Mathukuri and Manish Soni from Malad. Mr. Sharma has been arrested for his alleged role in the conspiracy and destruction of evidence in the case. The NIA had arrested Santosh Cheller and Anand Jadhav, both residents of Karar village in Malad, and they, NIA sources said, named Mr. Sharma and arrested and dismissed Police Inspector Sunil Main in the case. Through the investigation, they found that dismissed police officer Sachin Vaz and Mr. Main handed over Hiran to Mr. Satish, Mr. Manish, Mr. Santosh, and Mr. Anand on March 4, 2020, a day before Hiran's body was found in Mumbra Creek, NIA officials said. Later the accused made calls to Mr. Vaz and Mr. Sharma. We also recovered some cash from the suspects, which we believe was paid to them by the officers, they added. Mr. Sharma's role in Hiran's murder was being probed as well. However, Mr. Sharma contested the NIA's claim before the court and stated that he had no relations with Mr. Vaz. He asserted that he did not know anyone arrested in the case. He stated that he had appeared before the NIA whenever he was called. He claimed that he was being framed because of 2 groups in the police force. He added that he had no role in this case, and that he would not have been home if he was involved in the case. Minor reshuffle in central bureaucracy. Kumar now Minority Affairs Secretary. Special Correspondent, Ahmedabad. In a minor reshuffle in the top bureaucracy in the central administration, the Narendra Modi government on Thursday appointed senior bureaucrats Renuka Kumar and Sanjay Kumar Singh as secretaries for Minority Affairs and Department of Administrative Reforms and Public Grievances respectively. Mr. Singh, a 1987 batch IAS officer of the Madhya Pradesh Cadre, succeeds Indavar Pandat, who has been appointed as Women and Child Development Secretary. Mr. Pandat, a 1988 batch IAS officer of the West Bengal Cadre, had been appointed as Secretary, Department of Administrative Reforms and Public Grievances, DARPAGE, in April. Mr. Singh, now Special Secretary, Department of Agricultural Research and Education and Secretary, Indian Council of Agricultural Research, will also be the Secretary, Department of Pensions and Pensioners' Welfare in the Ministry of Personnel. Ms. Renuka Kumar is a 1987 batch IAS officer serving in her Khadur state, Uttar Pradesh. She has been appointed as the Minority Affairs Secretary in place of Pramod Kumar Das, who retires on June 30. The Appointments Committee of the Cabinet has also approved the appointment of Manoj Kumar Parada as Chairman, National Authority Chemical Weapons Convention, in the rank and pay of Secretary to the Government of India. Mr. Parada is a 1986 batch IAS officer of the Arunachal Pradesh, Goa, Mizoram, and Union Territory, Agmut, Khadur. B. Anand, Secretary, National Commission for Minorities, will be Secretary, Department of Ex-Servicemen Welfare in the Ministry of Defense. He will succeed Ravi Kant, who retires this month. Rules regulating cable TV network amended 3-level grievance redressal mechanism provided. Currently, channels have to comply with the program and advertising code. Murli Kumar K. Special Correspondent, New Delhi. The Information and Broadcasting Ministry on Thursday amended the rules regulating cable television networks, providing for a statutory mechanism for complaints raised by citizens regarding any content broadcast. At present, there are over 900 TV channels that are required to comply with the program and advertising code laid down by the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting under the Cable Television Network Rules. The Cable Television Networks Amendment Rules 2021 provides for a 3-level grievance redressal mechanism: self-regulation by broadcasters, self-regulation by the self-regulating bodies of the broadcasters, and oversight by an interdepartmental committee at the level of the center. A viewer could file a complaint directly to the broadcaster, who would have to respond within 15 days. If the complainant was not satisfied with the response, the complaint could be escalated to the self-regulating bodies set up by TV channels, which should deal with the case in 60 days. If the complainant is not satisfied with the decision of the self-regulating body, he may, within 15 days of such decision, prefer an appeal to the central government for its consideration under the oversight mechanism, it said. Such appeals would be dealt with by the interdepartmental committee set up under the oversight mechanism. The committee would be headed by the additional secretary in the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, and have members from the Ministry of Women and Child Development, Home Ministry, Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, Ministry of External Affairs, Ministry of Defense, and representatives of other ministries and organizations, including experts, as the center may decide. This third tier was not only kept aside to hear the appeals, it could take up complaints that come directly to the center. SC approves CBSE assessment formula. According to the scheme, the total marks awarded should be in consonance with the past performance of the school in Class 12 exams. A result committee under the principal would be formed in each school. It has been given the liberty to prepare the result by following the policy. The CBSE said it would declare the results by July 31, 2021. In case any candidate is not satisfied with the assessment done, based on the policy, he or she would be given an opportunity to take the examinations to be conducted by the board when the situation is more conducive. Most of the candidates will be happy with this scheme. When there is a manageable number, you can consider holding a physical exam later, a bench of Justices A.M. Kanwilkar and Dinesh Maheshwari addressed Attorney General K.K. Venugopal, appearing for the Union of India, which is the CBSE's controlling authority. CIS formula. The Council for the Indian School Certificate Examination, CIS, assessment formula would include taking into consideration the student's Class 10 ICSE board exams, project, and practical work in subjects, best marks obtained in school exams in classes 11 and 12, and the best performance of the school itself in the past 6 years. Interview Srinath Reddy. We must use the available vaccines to protect the most vulnerable. More data is needed on the ideal interval between 2 doses of Covishield, but there should be no hesitancy, says President of the Public Health Foundation of India. Bindu Shajan Purapadan. With the ideal interval between Covishield's first and second doses coming under debate, Public Health Foundation of India, PHFI, President Srinath Reddy said data on the Indian experience on the issue was still being gathered. He said there were reassuring reports of good protection being provided to healthcare workers. However, it was not yet clear how effective one dose of the vaccine is against the Delta variant, which is the dominant variant now in many parts of the country. He said more information was needed on that aspect, especially for high-risk, older age groups. The time gap between Covishield's first and second dose has come under the scanner in India yet again. Should we be reverting to a shorter time gap? The time gap issue initially surfaced due to the way the AstraZeneca trials were conducted internationally. The British-led international trial accidentally created two strands among the trial participants, a larger group which received the vaccine shots at a 4-week interval, as per trial protocol, and a smaller group which received the second shot after 12 weeks. Interestingly, the second group showed higher efficacy, 81%. So, Britain decided to adopt a 3-month dosing interval. A later large US trial of the same vaccine, with 32,000 participants, also showed a high efficacy, 76%. The WHO recommended an 8-12 week spacing. Those trials were conducted when the ancestral wild virus was in circulation. Then came the variants, against which most vaccines showed lower efficacy. Even then, the first dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine offered adequate protection against the Alpha variant. Against the Delta variant, however, the first dose provided only 30% efficacy against symptomatic infection, according to data from Public Health England. Against serious illness and death, the vaccine seems to provide reasonable protection with one dose. A second dose demonstrably increases efficacy against both mild and severe infections. Hence, the UK switched to an 8-week interval. Concerns have been raised about inadequate protection of a single dose against the Delta variant, in a French study. 2 doses do provide better protection. Hence, the suggestion from international experts that the people at risk of severe disease must be provided that level of protection earlier. Data on the Indian experience is still being gathered. There are reassuring reports of good protection being provided to healthcare workers. However, it is not yet clear how effective one dose is against the Delta variant, which is the dominant variant now in many parts of the country. We still need that data, especially for high-risk, older age groups and persons with comorbidities, not just in relatively younger and healthier healthcare workers. I would like to close this by pointing out the National Technical Advisory Group on Immunization, NTAGI, has stated that it will review recent evidence. Let us leave it to that expert body to review all available national and international evidence. In the meanwhile, people need to be assured that vaccines are protective even against the Delta variant. They should get both shots, whenever scheduled. If there is a limited supply till July, let us use the available vaccines to provide maximum protection to the most vulnerable. There is no reason for vaccine hesitancy. Has India vaccinated enough of its population? Is the pace of vaccination steady enough to allow opening of the country? We have not vaccinated enough numbers as yet. There are many susceptible individuals still. I believe the pace of vaccination will pick up from July, with increasing domestic production and international procurement. I think we do need to open the country, but carefully. Vaccines protect against disease, once the virus infects. For protection against viral transmission, we need to adhere to public health advisories, with discipline in our behavior for several months more. We must wear masks, avoid ill-ventilated and crowded places as much as possible, and not allow super-spreader gatherings. Safe behavior and vaccines will together protect us. We can't run fast on one leg. Is there enough data to start children's vaccination? International trials are available for some mRNA vaccines, to provide evidence of efficacy and safety. Trials in younger children, some including even infants aged 6 months, are now in progress. Some trials of child vaccination are now on in India too. We should wait for these international and domestic trials to be completed. If a nasal or orally administered mucosal vaccine proves safe and efficacious, that will be a boon for child vaccination. Is the mutating virus a cause of worry? Is there data showing that virus could escape vaccination cover? The worry is misplaced at present. Available vaccines are offering enough protection, at the right dose. Even if neutralizing antibody levels fall with time, T-cell immunity is likely to remain. In fact, that cell-mediated component of our immune system is capable of fighting the virus which has entered our cells, whereas antibodies can only attack the surface spike protein as it circulates in the blood. Memory T and B cells also store the image of the antigen and can readily reactivate our defense when the virus enters our body. Newer vaccines are also being prepared and some are under testing. Current mRNA vaccines are being tweaked to attack the spike protein mutations in the variants. Inactivated whole virus vaccines are being prepared, similar to Covaxin. Beyond that, multi-antigen vaccines are being tested, which combine the spike protein, the nucleocapsid, which wraps the genetic material of the virus, and ORF3a, which helps the viral replicas to exit the infected cells. Such vaccines will present a larger platter of our antigens to our immune system. Even if spike protein mutations evade the neutralizing antibodies, other antigens in the vaccine will still evoke an effective response. These internal antigens of the virus are also much slower in mutating than the surface spike protein. So, science can still provide us solutions. What is the way ahead? We need to combine 4 components of response as we move ahead. They are: protect ourselves from exposure to the virus and its entry into the body, prevent free passage of the virus by avoiding crowded places, non-essential travel, and super spreader gatherings, vaccinate as fast and as many as possible, and develop, evaluate, and introduce new vaccines which can effectively protect against current and emerging variants. Thank you. International news. Sri Lanka reports cases of Delta variant amid a daunting third wave. Currently, there are about 62,000 active cases. People across the country voice concern over economic distress. Long wait, people waiting in a queue to get their dose of COVID-19 vaccine in Colombo on Tuesday. Of Play Kruwanwani Arichchi. Mira Srinivasan Colombo. Sri Lanka on Thursday detected the highly transmittable Delta or B.1.617.2 variant of COVID-19 in 5 patients, amid a stubborn third wave persisting through a near-month-long lockdown in the country. Spotting an unusual outbreak in a Colombo neighborhood last week, the Allergy, Immunity, and Cell Biology Unit at the Sri Jayawardenepura University conducted genetic sequencing, studying 13 recent samples, and spotted the Delta variant. Speaking to The Hindu, Dr. Shandima Jiwandara, director of the unit, said, "The Delta variant comes with 3 main factors. It is highly transmittable, it causes severe disease, and it evades single-dose vaccine," he said. Thursday's finding points to the presence of the Delta variant in the community, a week after it was found in one patient in a quarantine facility. "It is the worst we could have imaged at such a time," Dr. Jiwandara said, pointing to the current caseload, about 62,000 active cases and low vaccine coverage. "We are already dealing with a spike in cases with the Alpha variant. Delta poses a greater risk because our vaccine coverage is low, and among those who are vaccinated a majority have got only 1 dose, he said. According to data published by the Epidemiology Unit of the Ministry of Health, more than 30 lakh people, or just over 16% of the Sri Lanka's adult population, have got at least 1 dose of vaccine Covishield, Sinopharm, and Sputnik as of June 16. Of those, only some 7 lakh, or less than 5% of the adult population, have got both doses. Slow drive. Meanwhile, nearly 6 lakh persons are awaiting their second dose of Covishield, delayed after India stopped exporting vaccines in the wake of its own devastating second wave. The Sri Lankan government is trying to tap other sources, while the country witnesses a steady surge in infections in the past fortnight, with daily cases spiking to over 3,000 on some days, despite a continuing lockdown allowing only essential services and select travel. For a week now, less than 20,000 PCR tests were carried out a day, data from the Health Promotion Bureau showed, although medical professionals are calling for more testing. Further, Colombo-based Institute for Health Policy, an independent research institution, found an average test positivity rate of 13.8% during the last week, based on official data. A high positivity rate and daily deaths, an average of 67 in the past week, coupled with a slow vaccination drive, concentrated in the capital, only heightens the threat posed by the Delta variant, experts have cautioned. The source of the Delta variant now detected in the community is yet to be established. The Sri Lankan Civil Aviation Authority's ban on travelers from India from disembarking, imposed early May, is in place, but visitors from select countries are allowed to enter. Observing it was likely imported, Dr. Jiwandara said, "Remember, the Delta variant has been detected not just in India, but in many other countries, including the UK and the US. It could have come from anywhere, we do not know yet." Economic distress. While health authorities grapple with the prevailing spike, and prepare to tackle the Delta variant, people across the country, especially daily wage earners, are reeling under the economic blow of the lockdown. Scores of garment sector workers, domestic workers, and youth employed in small shops and restaurants have lost their jobs since the pandemic struck. The country witnessed an increase in unemployment to 5.8% last year, the highest since 2009, after the civil war ended. Those engaged in rural livelihoods have also suffered huge losses, with limited or no access to the market, and falling prices for their produce. Women engaged in small-scale farming and fisheries in our district are desperate for some respite. Most traders don't buy their produce anymore. And in the event of a trader coming to their village to buy their produce, the women don't get to fix the price, but are forced to sell it for whatever the trader dictates, says Arunachalam Elangaswari, of the Sariya Women's Development Center in the Batiklo district, in the eastern province. With the entire family at home now, that too with much less income, some women are eating only if there is something left after the rest of the family has had a meal, said the community activist. The women are unable to buy sanitary pads, and we are hearing of many more cases of domestic violence in these past weeks. The situation among people without homes or personal toilets is miserable, especially when they contract COVID-19, like some families in Ratnapura district, in the Sabaragamuwa province. We work with the people in villages where rubber estate workers reside. They are mostly Malyaha Hill country Tamils from very poor homes. They have no access to health care. And most of them are not covered in the 5,000 rupee allowance, said Catholic priest Father Jiwantha Piris, referring to the government's COVID assistance scheme for low-income households. While families already registered for the government's poverty alleviation Samarthi program have received it, many poor families who are not part of the program have been left out of the pandemic allowance, according to him. They get excluded at every level. Hong Kong police arrest newspaper editors. Senior media figures have been accused of collusion with foreign forces to endanger national security. Major crackdown, Ryan Law, second from right, Apple Daily's editor-in-chief, being arrested in Hong Kong. AP. Ananth Krishnan. Hong Kong police on Thursday arrested 5 senior figures at the Apple Daily, a tabloid newspaper that had taken a strong stand supporting pro-democracy protests, under a new national security law. The 5, including publisher Chung Kim-hung and editor-in-chief Ryan Law, have been accused of collusion with a foreign country or with external elements to endanger national security, the South China Morning Post quoted a police statement as saying. Thursday's search of the paper's offices by more than 200 police officers was the second major move following last year's new national security law targeting a newspaper that had angered the pro-Beijing camp in Hong Kong for its coverage of the 2019 protests and calls for democracy. Hong Kong's National Security Police, the Post reported, cited more than 30 Apple Daily articles calling for sanctions against the city and mainland China, saying the articles were evidence of a conspiracy to collude with foreign forces in violation of the national security law. Prior to the passing of the law, the media in Hong Kong had broadly functioned with freedom that newspapers on the mainland are denied, under the one country, two systems model that guaranteed a range of rights following the 1997 handover. Attack on press freedom. The ambiguity of the national security law and how it defines collusion has been criticized by journalist associations in Hong Kong. The operation proves that the national security law has been weaponized to target certain media outlets, Hong Kong Journalism Association Chairman Chris Yung Kin-hing told the Post. Members of the public will refrain from sending tips to journalists on issues of public interest, as media outlets may not be able to guarantee the security of journalistic materials, he said. Sophie Richardson, China director at Human Rights Watch, said Thursday's raid was a new low in a bottomless assault on press freedom. This has nothing to do with enforcing the law, she said, and everything to do with politicist retribution. Chinese astronauts dock with new space station. The country plans to have a fully functioning station by 2022. Ananth Krishnan. The first group of Chinese astronauts on Thursday entered the country's under-construction space station, a major step in China's plans to have a fully functioning station by next year. On Thursday afternoon, the Shenzhou 12 spaceship, carrying the 3 astronauts, completed an automated rendezvous and docking with the Tianhe module, the China Manned Space Agency, CMSA, said, adding this signified that for the first time the Chinese have entered their own space station. Shenzhou 12 was launched on Thursday morning from the Jiuquan Launch Center in the Gobi Desert, and the astronauts entered Tianhe around 6.5 hours later, the agency said. The 3-man crew will be in orbit for 3 months. This is the first of 2 manned space missions planned for this year, part of an intense schedule of launches aimed at completing the space station in 2022. The official Xinhua news agency said the mission will help test technologies related to long-term astronaut stays and healthcare, the recycling and life support system, the supply of space materials, extravehicular activities and operations, and in-orbit maintenance. The Shenzhou 12 mission follows a busy few weeks for China's space program, coming after last month's launch of the Tianzhou 2 cargo spacecraft, which carried vital supplies for the space station. At least 5 more missions are planned for the year. Brexit hardliner becomes First Minister of Ireland. Paul Givan replaces Arlene Foster. Agents France presse Belfast. Brexit hardliner Paul Givan was installed as Northern Ireland's new First Minister on Thursday, as Britain's split from the European Union continues to cause friction in the bitterly divided province. Mr. Givan, 39, from the pro-UK Democratic Unionist Party, DUP, replaced Arlene Foster after she was ousted by colleagues for appearing too soft in her opposition to a controversial post-Brexit protocol governing Northern Irish trade. Michelle O'Neill, from the pro-Ireland Sinn Féin Party, was reconfirmed as Deputy First Minister after the British government intervened to help ease issues and avert a snap election. In his maiden speech, Mr. Givan failed to mention the protocol, which has riled resentment among unionists for effectively keeping Northern Ireland inside the EU customs union and single market for goods since the start of the year. U.S. to make Juneteenth a federal holiday. Associated Press, Washington. The U.S. will soon have a new federal holiday commemorating the end of slavery. The House voted 415 to 14 on Wednesday to make Juneteenth, or June 19th, the 12th federal holiday, and President Joe Biden is scheduled to sign the bill into law on Thursday. Juneteenth commemorates June 19, 1865, when Union soldiers brought the news of freedom to enslaved black people in Galveston, Texas. Russia is ready for further dialogue if U.S. is willing, Putin. Agence France Presse, Moscow. Russian President Vladimir Putin said on Thursday that Moscow is ready to continue dialogue with Washington after his summit meeting with President Joe Biden, provided the U.S. was also willing to do so. The two leaders held their first face-to-face meeting in Geneva on Wednesday to ease soaring tensions between Moscow and Washington, with relations at their lowest since the end of the Cold War. "We are ready to continue this dialogue to the same extent as the American side is," Mr. Putin said in televised remarks. He added that the atmosphere of the meeting was quite friendly and two leaders were able to understand each other on key issues. When asked to describe Mr. Biden, Mr. Putin said the U.S. president's portrayal in the press has nothing to do with reality. "Biden is a professional, you have to be very attentive when working with him so as not to miss something," Mr. Putin said. Iran goes to polls today. Agence France Presse, Tehran. Iranian voters are set to elect a new president on Friday, with the ultra-conservative Ebrahim Raisi expected to replace the moderate Hassan Rouhani after a host of candidates were disqualified. The vote comes at a time when the recession-hit country is in talks with world powers to revive the nuclear deal. Thank you. Economy news. CII urges Indian rupee 3 lakh crore stimulus, industry group pushes for cash transfers, fuel tax cut to help revive demand. Cash in hand, it's not a good idea to raise resources via higher taxes at a time of recession, says TV Narendran. K. Pikumani. Special correspondent, New Delhi. Mooting urgent fiscal support to shore up the economy. Industry body CII on Thursday said the government has room to provide a Indian rupee 3 lakh crore stimulus and advocated a reduction in fuel taxes and enhancement in cash transfers to households to revive demand. Stressing that livelihoods had taken a severe hit due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Confederation of Indian Industry, CII, President TV Narendran called for employment generation to be the central focus of policy measures and an expansion of the central bank's balance sheet to accommodate a fiscal push of 1.3% of GDP. The ongoing second wave has had a significant impact on economic activity in this quarter, and a large part of the labor force faced health issues, either themselves or in their families, Mr. Narendran said, stressing that health exigencies and job losses had squeezed spending ability. Terming the demand shock as a big area of concern for India's consumption-led economy, the CII president said the cumulative impact of two waves on incomes, livelihoods, and consumer sentiment, coupled with increase in household medical expenses, are likely to impact consumer demand for some time. There is always a temptation to raise resources through higher taxation to fund higher spending. But we believe it's not a good idea at the time when the economy is in recession, and instead some tax reductions could incentivize spending, he said, calling for a reduction in excise duties on fuel, some temporary GST rate cuts and inclusion of aviation turbine fuel, ATF, under the GST regime. High fuel prices are impacting businesses as well, he said, especially in sectors such as aviation where ATF costs are 60% of total costs. We will recommend that the center takes a balanced view on the need to manage inflation and push growth, and the way they deal with oil prices is one part of the puzzle that needs to be fixed, said Mr. Narendran, who is the Global Chief Executive Officer and Managing Director of Tata Steel. Shares slip, rupee falls as Fed signals earlier rate increases, Sensex slides 0.34%, rupee drops to weakest since early May. Press Trust of India, Mumbai. Equity benchmarks fell for the second straight session on Thursday, mirroring weakness in global markets after the U.S. Federal Reserve surprised investors by signaling faster-than-expected rate increases. A sharp drop in the rupee, which plunged 76 paise against the dollar, also sapped risk appetite, traders said. The 30-share BSE Sensex ended 0.34% lower at 52,323.33. The broader NSE Nifty declined 76.15 points, or 0.48%, to 15,691.40. Banking and finance stocks accounted for most of the losses, while the IT pack saw brisk buying, fueled by a weak rupee. IndusInd Bank was the top loser in the Sensex, shedding 2.9%, followed by Dr. Reddy's, NTPC, Maruti, Bajaj Auto, Axis Bank, Bharti, and HDFC. Ultratech Cement, Asian Paints, TCS, Infosys, Tech Mahindra, and HCL Tech were among major gainers. Domestic equities traded weak today on account of weak global cues, as investors focused more on the U.S. Federal Reserve raising the country's economic growth forecast while noting its projection to hike interest rates sooner than expected, said Vikas Jain, senior research analyst at Reliance Securities. The Fed raised the U.S. growth forecast to 7% this year, while officials moved their first projected rate increases from 2024 into 2023 and opened talks about when to pull back on the $120 billion in monthly bond purchases, Mr. Jain added. The rupee dropped 1% to 74.08, its weakest level since early May, while the benchmark 10-year bond yield slid slightly to end at 6.04%. Indian IT on track to hit revenue goal, NASSCOM sector continues to be net job creator. Special Correspondent Bengaluru. The Indian IT industry is on track to meet its vision of $300 to $350 billion in revenue by 2025, given strong deal pipelines and a bright business outlook, Industry Association NASSCOM said on Thursday. The industry was a net hirer of skilled talent, adding 1.38 lakh people in FY21, and had robust hiring plans for FY22 with top players TCS, Infosys, Wipro, HCL Tech, and Tech Mahindra planning to add more than 96,000 employees, it said. Responding to media reports about automation leading to job losses, the association said the industry would continue to be a net creator of jobs. NASSCOM would like to clarify, around hiring and job creation, it said. With the evolution of technology and increasing automation, the nature of traditional IT jobs and roles will evolve, overall leading to the creation of newer jobs. The IT and BPM sectors together had headcount of more than 4.5 million as of March 2021. Online casual gaming to grow at 29%. Special Correspondent Bengaluru. India's online casual gaming sub-segment, a Indian rupee 6000 crore industry in FY21, is projected to reach 16,900 Indian rupees crore in FY25, growing at a CAGR of 29%, KPMG said in a study. The sub-segment accounted for 44% of India's total online gaming industry in FY21 and its share is likely to touch 58% by FY25, showed the study titled, Beyond the Tipping Point, a primer on casual gaming in India. In terms of users, as per the report, at 420 million gamers in FY21, it accounted for 97% of the total gamers in India. However, the sub-segment was significantly under-indexed on monetization with lower ARPUs as compared with other gaming markets. Thank you. Thank you so much for watching this video as a podcast. Do like, share and comment. Press the subscribe button and hit the bell icon to get new notifications. Thank you. Take care and stay safe. God bless you all. Jai Ma Bharti. To download news and editorials in MP3, follow us on Telegram, Virtual School Official. The link is provided in the description below.